everyone, before we jump into today's video, I wanted to let you know that you're probably gonna see a couple of shots where I have like a weird little mark on my face, and then it's gonna disappear. That's because apparently I had, I don't know, a piece of lint or something on my face, and I didn't notice it until after downloading the footage from the camera. But because I shot this over 2 days, I didn't really feel like reshooting just to accommodate for that. So before you comment, or you can comment anyway, yes, I'm aware that there's something on my face. I got that out of the way. Now, please enjoy this video. Hi, my name is PJ Perez. I'm a recovering journalist and independent filmmaker, and since 2006, an infrequent YouTuber. And today on this here YouTube channel, which you should probably subscribe to because apparently 98% of you watching my videos aren't subscribed, so just click it now. We'll get that out of the way. It won't be awkward anymore. Today, we're going to talk about the top lessons I learned making my first feature documentary. Right after this. So I recently released my first feature-length film, a historical documentary called Parkway of Broken Dreams. It's about a little-known but highly influential cultural scene that sprung up in the shadow of the Las Vegas Strip in the 1990s. It took about 3 years to make, mainly because I was the only crew working on it, while holding down a day job, navigating a global pandemic, and also dealing with several deaths in my family. And yet, somehow, this film didn't turn out too badly. It played at several film festivals where it won a few awards, and I took it on the road to do a handful of screenings in markets that had friendly audiences. It got picked up for national public television distribution, and it's now available on the PBS app, as well as a bunch of streaming services, including Amazon Prime, Apple TV, Xumo, Tubi, and you get the idea. That's not too bad for a kind of niche documentary that was basically assembled in my spare bedroom for under $30,000. All that said, if I had to do it again, and there's a pretty good chance that I will make another feature-length documentary film, there's a lot of things that I would do differently. So I thought I'd share with everyone my biggest takeaways from the experience of working on this documentary over the last 3.5 years, and hopefully you'll learn something that will help you with something that you're working on now or in the future. Are you ready? Let's do this. All right, so the first lesson that I learned making this documentary is to make a realistic budget. When I started working on this film, I had no idea how to make a film budget. I understood how money works, but I really didn't have any idea how much it would cost to make even a simple one-person crew documentary film. Actually, I had no idea how to do a lot of things when I started work on this documentary. I went into it kind of without a plan. I pretty much grabbed my prosumer camcorder, a cheap LED light kit, and just started filming interviews. Once I had enough footage to put together a teaser trailer, I realized that this thing was going to be probably something more than just a few notes in a Google Doc, and I might need to actually get some funding to complete the project. I started looking for funding for the film, grants, things like that, and of course everybody wanted to see a budget, and I found the simplest template that I could to kind of just plug in sort of rough estimates of numbers based on A, what I'd already spent, and B, what I expected to spend. But the budget was just for things like travel, insurance, underestimated legal fees, the few things I thought that I would have to spend on just for like the next 6 months to get the production of the film done. But even by the time I launched a crowdfunding campaign for Parkway Broken Dreams, which ended up being successful, I still didn't have a clue what I was doing as far as budgeting. Like, I put out numbers that seemed reasonable on the crowdfunding webpage. It was reasonable amounts because I wanted to make it clear that I wasn't going crazy and trying to make a huge production. In the end, I way underestimated everything. From film festival, submission fees, to legal expenses. Actually, legal expenses was one of the biggest things I underestimated. I should have gone to law school. If you're planning to become a filmmaker, go to law school instead. Now, regardless of the size of the production you're working on, you need to know realistically what things are gonna cost, both for your own sake, so that you can actually say, hey, here's how much I need to raise, and here's how much I can actually spend, but also if you're trying to get funding from either direct investors or from, let's say, a nonprofit organization, they need to know that you actually know what you're doing, that you're not just throwing numbers on a page. So it doesn't actually help you to underestimate or to kind of half-ass it. You really need to understand what it costs to do these things and to do them right. Recently, I had to put together a film budget for another project, and let me tell you, that was a whole different experience. I went through and did a line item budget. I got quotes from vendors. I took into consideration everything: production assistants, editing, music licensing, the legal fees, of course, COVID coordinator, all of the things that really you need to be taking into consideration. If you want this thing to go somewhere, you need to really have all of your ducks in a row. And that brings me to my next very related point. Take care of business from the start. So I knew enough businessy stuff to get an LLC set up for the film, which does two things mainly. It separates your personal finances from the film's finances, and it separates your personal legal responsibility from legal responsibility for the film. I knew all this, and yet I didn't take care of that until almost half a year of filming and after raising $13,000 through a crowdfunding project for this film. What that meant was that I had an extra $13,000 of personal income that I had to pay taxes on, and all of the release forms and contracts that participants in the film signed prior to the LLC's formation needed to be all re-signed and redone. Again, it all worked out fine in the end, but this is stuff that really you need to get on top of as soon as possible. You definitely have some leeway, but if you're going to be signing any sort of contracts or agreements with anyone, it needs to be with an entity that is going to be the producer of the film. Let's get to our next point: fiscal sponsorship. The other thing that I didn't do from a business and financial perspective was get a fiscal sponsor. A fiscal sponsor is basically a nonprofit organization that works with filmmakers, often documentary filmmakers especially, to pass on their nonprofit status to your project by collecting the donations and contributions to the film on your behalf. They take a small fee, usually between 3 and 5%. It really gives you a great benefit because A, people contributing money to your film are doing so to a nonprofit, which means the contributions are possibly tax write-offs for them, which may incentivize some donors. Secondly, it sets you up to be able to apply for grants that are only available to nonprofits. There are a lot of organizations that do grants, especially for independent and documentary filmmakers, but it has to be for a nonprofit. One of the easiest ways for you to do this without you having to go through the whole process of setting up a 501c3 organization on your own is fiscal sponsorship. Had I known about fiscal sponsorship prior to starting Parkway Broken Dreams, or really just prior to collecting any money, I absolutely would have gone that route, because Parkway Broken Dreams was a perfect case for a project that would have been open to receiving grants and funding that's specifically targeted for nonprofits. And that brings me to another businessy sort of thing. Have your distribution plan really together before you start. I put together what I thought was comprehensive marketing and distribution proposal. I have some experience in the world of marketing, not distribution though. I'd done a little bit of homework. I'd come up with target audiences, which is really important. You should know your audience. You need to be able to communicate that to funders. You need to be able to communicate that to potential distributors. You need to be able to communicate that to the media. I didn't really fully understand the distribution landscape. I kind of thought, okay, well, once the film is closer to completion, then I'll really start reaching out because, I'll have a rough cut of the film to show or something like that. That was probably a bit of a mistake. What I learned since then is that you really need to have exactly how you want this film to get out and who you realistically think it's going to get out to. I knew I wanted to do public television distribution, for example, but I didn't exactly know what that entailed. I didn't really learn until literally 2.5 years into the project, at which point I very quickly put together a proposal for NETA, which is the National Educational Telecommunications Association, and that's actually who ended up picking up Parkway Broken Dreams to distribute nationally to public television stations. But I didn't learn about that whole process until I attended a webinar far into the making of this film. There's a ton of distributors out there who work with independent filmmakers. You need to kind of give them the chance to be a partner on that earlier on for several reasons. There might be certain technical specs that you need to meet for a broadcaster or a distributor. There was a lot of things I needed to do to Parkway Broken Dreams after I was already done with the full edit of the film for theatrical release that I had to fix or edit or change for public television. You have to really understand all of that stuff. You need to make sure that you're shooting in a format that is acceptable to the distributor. Like Netflix, for example, has a lot of very specific technical requirements you have to meet if you're producing content for them. Okay, so far we've talked about a lot of kind of boring businessy stuff, but that's because I wanted to save the fun, sexy stuff for closer to the end. So one of the other biggest lessons that I learned making this film was don't do everything yourself. So as I mentioned earlier, I was pretty much the sole crew member on Parkway Broken Dreams. Now, that's not actually that abnormal for a documentary of this nature. Most of the original footage for the film consisted of either sit-down interviews or exterior B-roll. It wasn't that challenging for me to come into someone's home or business and set up lights and camera and audio and just start recording and have an interview and conversation and then be done and out of there. And the archival footage that I gathered or was provided was mostly already digitized, so there actually wasn't that much work for me to do on that end either. But I also did the editing of the film, and the music supervision, and the coloring, and the sound mix, and the mastering. Pretty much anything related to the creation of the film, I did single-handedly. On top of all the peripheral things like marketing and public relations and social media and advertising, I only outsourced a few things like the design of our poster, which my really talented good friend Hernan Valencia worked on. I obviously had a lawyer doing the legal stuff, and I did have a few friends who helped out capturing some shots that I wasn't physically available to get. But outside of that, 99% of the film is really by PJ Perez. In the end, it all worked out, and I don't want you to think that you can't work this way, but a lot of deficiencies creatively in the film were the direct result of me trying to do everything myself. And let me give you some examples of that. Like, if you were to look at the interviews in the actual order that I shot them, as opposed to chopped up and placed around the film in the narrative, you would see that the earliest interviews look a lot worse than the later interviews. That's because I was learning a lot of things as I was going. So because I was doing this all myself, I actually would have been better served by having a 2-camera shoot for each interview, because it would have made A, the editing much more flexible, and B, it would have made the visuals much more dynamic. The other thing that would have come in handy if I wasn't doing this all myself was making sure that I didn't forget to do things. I wanted to shoot B-roll at every location where I was doing interviews, and I did that for the first couple of interviews, and then I forgot, and then I would do it for the next one, and I'd forget. Honestly, this list would be a lot longer if I broke out all the things I learned that are just related to me not doing everything myself. Okay, one more lesson related to being a one-person crew. Have somebody take behind-the-scenes photos and videos. I cannot tell you from a marketing perspective how important it is to have those assets to work with. People love to see behind-the-scenes stuff. They just do. When you're in production, you don't have trailers or clips to show people, but you can have behind-the-scenes footage. And it's great. It lets people know, especially if they're invested in your film in some way, you need to be able to let them know that this is happening. And the best way to do that is with behind-the-scenes images. You don't have to have a super professional photographer or videographer do this stuff. If you can just have a friend come with you, you can just have them take stuff on their phone. I mean, everybody's phones takes amazing photo and video now, and there's no reason not to do that. I did a lot of behind the scenes shots that was just like a shot through a viewfinder, or it was just like an empty chair with lights because I couldn't take images of myself. And the other part of that is also being able to get travelogue footage, or maybe material that you're going to use for bonus features on a DVD at some point. Or if you ever want to do a documentary about the making of your documentary, like, it's helpful to have that. So another thing that I kind of wish that I had done a little bit differently with Parkway Broken Dreams is spending a little bit more effort chasing down the interviews I really wanted. So I had a working list of about 50 potential interview subjects for Parkway Broken Dreams. I actually ended up shooting 26 interviews for the film, which is actually quite a bit for an 80-minute film, especially considering that I used, I think, footage from all 26. Now, there are a few interviews I wish I'd pushed a little bit harder for, but I didn't because I let scheduling conflicts get in the way, and also my adherence to a consistent look for the film. So for example, I really wanted to get a gentleman named Wayne Corner on camera to talk about the record store that he formerly owned off of Maryland Parkway called The Underground. Wayne lived just outside of Portland, Oregon. I was doing other filming in the Portland area, so I figured it'd be easy enough for us to connect and for me to go out to his place and shoot the interview, and everything would be great. We had a lot of back and forth, and just the timing didn't work out for whatever reason. And I was like, well, it's not that big of a thing. I've got plenty of people on camera talking about Wayne and his store, and Wayne also gave me a whole bunch of still images to work with. So I was like, I've got plenty of material, no problem. Well, Wayne ended up passing away, I think about a year later. While it's tragic unto itself, it's also a real shame that I wasn't able to get him on camera to talk about his own story. So another example is I really wanted to get one of the members of the Killers, the band from Las Vegas, in the film. Even though that band came out of a scene that sort of happened after the scene that's covered in the film, several members of the band were around at that time in their younger years. In particular, Ronnie Benucci, who actually has been a friend of mine since we were like 19 years old. He used to hang out in the coffee shops in Maryland Parkway. It's mentioned in the film, but he's not talking about it. Mark Stormer, the bass player, again, he came up in that scene, reached out to me actually proactively saying, hey, I heard about your project. I'd like to be involved. For whatever reason, we just can't get the schedules to work out. It didn't impact the storytelling of the film at all, but from a marketing and distribution perspective, which I've touched on already, it would have been something to say, hey, this person from this famous rock band is in this film. You know, it does help to sell it both to potential viewers and to potential distributors. As with all these lessons I've learned, it didn't impact the outcome of the film, but it would have been nice to have. And I guess that brings me to my final lesson. And that lesson is, you just need to go and make your film. I learned all these lessons and so many more that would take 15 more videos to even get across. Making my first feature-length documentary. Not waiting for someone to say, hey, here's the money and the materials for you to do this. You don't have to wait for anyone's permission to make your first film. If you have the talent and the drive to do it, you will find a way to do it. You don't need to have fancy equipment. You don't need to have a lawyer and a studio and all sorts of stuff. It helps in the end when you want to potentially see some sort of revenue or distribution with your project, but you don't need it to get started. That's the great thing about the world we're living in now. You have access to technology that makes it really easy to do this kind of stuff that I didn't have when I was younger and that generations prior didn't have at all. You can take your phone that's in your pocket and go shoot things. And people say that all the time, but it's so true. The quality of the content is a lot of times so much more important than the quality of the aesthetic, right? There's some basic principles that you want to keep in mind, and maybe get into that in a future video, but the point is you don't need someone to approve your project to go start making that movie or making that album or making that comic book. Take your skills and drive and creativity and you just do it. In the end, you might end up sitting here telling someone about the lessons you learned making your first feature documentary or your first feature film. Anyway, that's the top lessons I learned making my first feature documentary. I hope that you learned something. I hope you were mildly entertained. Go out and make some cool stuff. The world needs more cool stuff. Hey, y'all like the shirt? Because I actually just opened the package from Stitch Fix and put it on for the first time. That is no BS. But this video is not sponsored by Stitch Fix. It'd be cool if it was, because Stitch Fix is not the cheapest service out there, but they're not the most expensive, but they're not paying me, so I can't recommend them. But if anyone from Stitch Fix is watching this,